if you have a high aspect ratio sail, let's say tall, narrow sail, such as this A rig on an IOM, you just about have to have paneled sails, because whatever curve you induce at the foot by the way you position the outhaul, it just won't carry very far up the sail. The Victoria rig, on the other hand, is a low aspect ratio sail, which is to say it's relatively short for the width. And quite a bit of the curvature that you put in at the foot, the way you adjust the outhaul, carries out most of the way up the sail. That's why a Victoria will do okay in most conditions with a single panel sail. But if you want the very best, you have to go to panels. Hugh Hamilton was nice enough years ago to allow me to copy his sail patterns, and I have that somewhere set aside on drafting film. I've transferred it to white paper versions. You can see the overall jib there in the background, and if you look through the tri-spy laid out on the tabletop, you'll see the pattern for the main. Now, while I intend to use tri-spy from that massive lifetime supply roll in the background, because it is pretty close to flat from the factory, I wanted to tell you you probably won't be buying such a massive quantity of tri-spy, and it'll come in a tighter roll like that shown right next to the masking tape. And if that's the case, you need to make alternate panels with alternate curvature, and the curvature should be 4 1/2, just as indicated here. This shows you that there is curve along the luff of the main. This is intended to match some of the curvature that will be induced in the mast, which I'll show you in a minute. You should be able to see that the mast is curved just a little bit. And that's because of the moment arm between where the backstay connects at the top of the mast and the lower point on the mast where the jib stay connects. This induces a bend, and your sail needs to take that into account. This is a broad seaming tool, and I used it for a couple of years for panel sails. This is close to the traditional way of handling sails, and the idea is that you cut a airfoil shaped curve in a wide board, and then with a table saw or a band saw you cut it down the middle and then taper the sides so that you get an angle between the two edges, and the steepness of that angle along with the curvature here determines how much extra material goes into the seam. I was thinking that I had a little too much curvature, so I reworked it, and now I don't have it nearly enough, but I don't use it that much anymore anyway. But you can, I did it using a router to duplicate the shape from one board to 5 others. The preferred way is to have a band saw that can cut the shape all at one time before you do the center cuts. This is one of my homemade seaming tools. Another place in the video I'll go into some detail about how to build one. But for now, let's just notice that there is a little gap in there between the strip and the plank, and I'm going to use that to put a little extra material into a panel before I tape them together. With the gap still set in the strip, I'm going to tape this first panel down. Now I'm going to take the curve out of the thing. And if you have the light just right, you can see there's a little bit of a wrinkle there right below the edge of the paper where I'll be gluing it. Taping it. And now if we tape the panel like this so that I can put a little bit of a pull on it, you can see there's just a little bit of curvature built into that seam by that extra material. Now, one curious thing about that extra material, it doesn't really matter whether you put it into a horizontal seam, a vertical seam, or a seam at some other angle. This is that same two pieces of paper taped together, just cut down now as though it was a vertical seam. And I'm going to insist, whether you can see it or not, that there's a little bit of curvature in there, just because, in effect, what we did is we added some sphericity to the sail, and it just doesn't matter that much whether it's a vertical seam or a diagonal seam or whatever. If you want to try a radial cut on a sail, you can do it just this way. That is, I intend to use Tri-Spy for the bottom three panels, the three largest of the sail. And I'm going to use the polycarbonate coated ripstop nylon for the top two panels. Polycarbonate coated ripstop nylon makes decent sails. It's not my favorite material, but any regatta you go to, you'll probably find one or two boats that are using it. I like it for the top two panels as accent. It comes in wild colors. It's inexpensive and fairly easy to work with. The seams need to be marked with some precision and then cut out very nicely along that straight line. Other parts should be left with extra material, which you'll trim after the sail is completely assembled. I like to use a double row of tape, sort of a belt and suspenders type, so you'll see that I have about a 1/2 inch overlap at each seam. Note that I've identified the panel and the orientation so that I can put the pieces together later. You might be surprised at how difficult that is if you don't have it marked ahead of time. You also see that I've marked the seam edges That's to help me when I tape them together. Otherwise, the seam is the only critical cut on all panels. The bottom panel has, of course, only the single seam. So all the panels for both sails are cut out and laid down on the table, overlapping roughly how they will be when the seams are taped. And what remains now is to tape those seams. After the seams are taped, I'll trim both sails to the final size. That's why the precision on matching the seams isn't exactly critical. It just makes me feel better to be trying to be precise as I go.